So good morning, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and call our meeting to order. Both our presentations are on Zoom. So if I can have your attention. And one of our new representatives on our committee, Representative Laura McDonald, will open us with a prayer. I think your mic number is 10. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Can we pray, please? Dear Lord, thank you for a wonderful day. Thank you for bringing us together to do your will as we represent the citizens of Georgia. Be with each of us, be with our presenters as they bring their work to us and that we do your will for them. Be with our members as they travel home today to see their families and see their constituents. We do this in your name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. So this morning we have two presentations on coal ash remediation. We have done this for the past several years. As when this became an issue before the state of Georgia, we asked that EPD and Georgia Power update us and make us aware of any situations. And so they will be doing the presentations on a Zoom type call. But to our committee, we have the subcommittee assignments now. So if you'll check with Nicole or David and be sure and get your assignments there. And now I'm going to turn it over to David Hartman to bring in our first presenter, which is Rick Dunn with EPD. Well, we can see him, we just can't.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was waiting for David. I apologize. Can you hear me?
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Good, thank you.
My name is Rick Dunn. I'm the director of Georgia EPD. And Madam Chair, before I get into today's topic, I just wanted to take a moment to introduce a new staff member we have. Is Mr. John Eunice, who's EPD's new deputy director. Today is John's first day with EPD. So his 8 o'clock, his first day, he's here with House Natural Resources and the Environment. John is replacing Lauren Curry, who joined the governor's office back in December. John is from Valdosta, but has spent the last 6 years in Washington as the general counsel and legislative director in Senator Perdue's office. We are glad to have John on board. And with your permission, I'd like to give John just a moment or two to introduce himself to the committee. So John, you want to say hello?
Sure. Thank you, Director, and thank you, Madam Chair. It's an honor to be here. It's an honor to join EPD. I'm very excited to be back in Georgia after spending the last few years in Washington. While I was there on Senator Perdue's team, I had the opportunity to work on, I directed his entire legislative portfolio, but I had the opportunity to work directly on a lot of the environmental, water, and infrastructure issues that EPD so frequently deals with. So I'm very excited to be back in Georgia permanently. Look forward to working with you and the members of the committee and all members of the General Assembly. Thanks for giving me a couple of minutes to say hello and look forward to being a part of the hearing.
Thank you very much, John. And on behalf of all the committee members, I can definitely emphasize to you, we certainly want your contact information because we are the funnel through which all our General Assembly members approach us about environmental needs. And so if you'll just get us your contact information and as time permits, introduce yourselves to us. So thank you and welcome aboard.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks, John, and thank you, Madam Chair. And we'll certainly, John will provide you with that contact information. So I'm going to try to share my screen now. So just give me a moment here. I believe this is going to work. It may take a second to load. So I was asked this morning to provide the committee with some background and update on EPD's CCR permitting program. And of course, I'm more than happy to do so. I will let you know, Madam Chair, I'm also joined by Chuck Mueller, who is the chief of our land protection branch, as well as Jack Kapp, who's chief of our watershed protection branch. And both Jack and Chuck manage programs with responsibility relating to CCR impoundments. Are you able to see my screen?
Not yet. Yes, we have it.
Okay, great. So CCR or coal ash is one of Georgia's and the nation's largest industrial waste streams. Historically, coal ash that has not been beneficially reused has been stored in large surface water impoundments or on-site landfills. In the fall of 2015, US EPA finalized new regulations affecting the disposal of CCR at electricity generating facilities in order to protect surface water and groundwater from contamination. EPA's actions follow dam failures at surface impoundment at TVA Kingston in Tennessee back in 2008, as well as at North Carolina's Dan River plant, Duke Energy's plant in 2014. The new rules issued by EPA were the result of extensive study and review. In short, the federal rules established that CCR may be placed in existing and new on-site landfills or surface impoundments that meet the specified location, design, and operational criteria issued in the rule. In other words, if you're going to place CCR in surface impoundment or landfills, on-site landfills, you must meet certain siting requirements. Sites not meeting these siting requirements would require proper upgrade or closure. In addition to the siting requirements, the rule required extensive groundwater monitoring, and there are provisions in the rule that would trigger closure for sites that fail to meet these groundwater monitoring quality requirements. Initially, the EPA rule is what we call a self-executing rule. Power companies had to follow the procedures outlined in the rule and were liable to citizen suits if they did not follow those procedures. The federal rule contained no oversight or enforcement from the EPA. Instead, they were reliant upon citizen suits for enforcement. Shortly after EPA CCR rules were issued, Georgia EPD, made the determination that more oversight was warranted. Reliance upon citizen suits to enforce the rules provisions would not be sufficient. So in October of 2016, EPD adopted state rules that incorporated EPA CCR requirements, but included public agency oversight through a permitting program. EPD was the first state in the nation to adopt a new state permitting program incorporating the new CCR rules. Once we established our permitting program, Congress later authorized the EPA to institute a permit program or allowed EPA to authorize states to operate a permit program in lieu of the EPA. But as of now, EPA has no permitting program, and only 2 states, Georgia and Oklahoma, have approved state permitting programs. By rule, all CCR surface impoundments in Georgia must cease accepting waste and close because of the siting and groundwater monitoring requirements. Under the state rules, all CCR surface impoundments must apply for, or had to apply for a permit by November of 2018. So since all of the surface impoundments, I need to keep up with my slides, I apologize. Since all surface impoundments in Georgia must close, let me talk about the rules closure requirements. Both federal and state rules establish 2 options for the closure of ash ponds: closure by removal or closure in place. With closure by removal, what you see on the left side of your slide, under closure by removal, a CCR pond is dewatered, the waste is excavated and moved to another site, typically a lined landfill. At the time of closure, under closure by removal, groundwater monitoring concentrations must not exceed applicable standards. Once those standards are met, once the groundwater monitoring standards are met under closure by removal, the CCR unit is considered closed. No additional monitoring or post-closure care requirements are required for the site. The second option in the rule is closure in place, which is on the right side of your screen and your slides. Under closure in place, obviously, as the name implies, the existing CCR is left in place after dewatering and stabilization. A cover system is installed over the waste to prevent infiltration and erosion. And once the site or the unit is closed, the owner or operator is required to conduct at least 30 years of post-closure care and groundwater monitoring. During this period of post-closure care, any releases from the site detected through groundwater monitoring must be addressed to the rule's corrective action requirements. Now, both the federal and state rules do not require an operator to choose one option of closure over another. It is their choice. It is the operator's choice to choose, for this site, I'm going to do closure by removal or closure in place. And in Georgia, they apply for a permit for either closure by removal or closure by place. EPD's responsibility under the permit program is to make sure they meet the performance standards established by the rule for the type of closure they want to proceed with. If they meet the performance requirements for the type of closure they are proposing, a permit will be issued. And if the permit is granted because of Georgia's permit program, we oversee the process for the entire life cycle and can initiate enforcement action if permit conditions are not met. It's important to point out that EPA, US EPA, has determined that both standards, both closure by removal and closure in place, can be equally protective of human health and the environment. EPA believes that one option is not necessarily better than the other. So let me go to Georgia's ash ponds. On this slide, you'll see Georgia has 30 ash ponds located at 11 active or closed power plants. This particular table that I'm showing is organized by plant. Now, a single plant can contain multiple ponds. I've sorted this list by the estimated volume of ash stored in ponds. You can see that there in the third column. There's also a column for the proposed method of closure as reflected in the application for a permit. Our internal estimated dates for permit issuance and estimated closure date. Now, this closure date you'll see for proposals that propose a closure in place. This is the closure date, estimated closure date. From that date, at least 30 years of post-closure care would kick off from that closure date. As of today, EPD has finalized 5 CCR permits. All 5 of these permits that we've issued so far have been closure by removal. We've issued permits for Plant McIntosh in Effingham County, Crisp County Power Authority, as well as 3 ponds at Plant Hammond in Floyd County. As you can see from the chart, the next 2 plants we anticipate completing for permit are Plant McManus in Glenn County and Plant Bowen in Bartow County. We are currently anticipating having all CCR permits issued by next calendar year, but that's somewhat aspirational at this point, and it depends upon a lot of variables, particularly information that we need to evaluate. My next slide, we certainly don't talk about permit applications under review, and you just saw the number of permit applications we have under review. But we can talk about the process that we'll use in issuing these permits. At EPD, permit issuance is generally guided by the Georgia Administrative Procedures Act, the Georgia APA. And on this slide, I have a graphic that shows the general steps for a permit issued under the act. And I'll talk a little bit about specific procedures we are following for the CCR permits that go above and beyond the APA. So the first step in the process is public notice. This is a public notice that we have completed a draft permit. We have a listserv set up just for CCR information. Any individual that signs up on that listserv will receive a notification that a draft permit has been issued. A copy of the draft permit will be available on our website, and all supporting materials will be available for in-person review. Once a public notice is issued, it kicks off a public comment period. The rules require a 30-day public comment period, but at least for the controversial or the CCR permits where there's a high degree of public interest, we will extend that public comment period to at least 60 days due to its complexity. Comments on the proposed draft rule may be submitted via email or regular mail. For permits where there's a high degree of public interest, we will also set a date for at least one public hearing. We will certainly open to more public hearings if needed. And at these hearings, public comment will also be taken. And the purpose, I'll just mention a public comment and these public hearings is we are interested in relevant scientific, legal, and operational information that would influence the conditions in the permit. These are not necessarily votes, but again, we're actively seeking, we want information, scientific information, legal information, operational information, other information that could be relevant to the permit and help improve our draft permit. When the comment period closes, we'll have to take a good bit of time to review all the comments. We may make modification to the draft permit as a result of the comments, and we also must prepare a response to all comments. And when the response to comments is complete, all that work is completed by EPD, we will issue a final permit. Once that final permit is issued, it is subject to appeal at GOSA and judicial review throughout the Georgia court system. Judicial review at Superior Court, Court of Appeals, and possibly the Georgia Supreme Court. I'll also note that in addition to the state process, there's still a federal process that operates concurrently with the state process. There's still federal jurisdiction available for these CCR closure plans, and the citizen suit provision is still applicable in that area. Madam Chair, those are the kind of the process and where we're at as related to our CCR permitting program, and I'll be glad to take any comments or questions.
Thank you. And we have a split presentation today. So I've tried to compile a question that I've been getting from various committee members and other legislators. And so specifically, I'm going to ask you, does EPD, when reviewing a proposed coal ash pond closure, have the existing authority to require a lined landfill if the scientific data indicates the need?
Yes, ma'am. If I wouldn't say if the scientific data indicates the need, if the proposed closure in place does not meet the performance standards that are articulated in the rule, we can require closure by removal.
And the follow-up on that, and that is for the next 30 years after the closure?
No, the post-closure care, yes. So if for example, a permit was issued for closure in place, and during the next 30 years through post-closure care, it was determined that the contaminants cannot be adequately maintained within the site that is covered, yes, closure by removal could later be required.
And the reason our committee is so interested in that is that we feel we have the responsibility to look after the needs of the citizens of Georgia, and this is the question that keeps coming up. The second question is clarification on which states have met EPA's approval. I think you said Oklahoma and Georgia.
Oklahoma and Georgia currently, I believe, is still the only two that have been authorized by EPA. That the permitting program meets all of the federal rule requirements.
Thank you. And then again, to our committee members, before our meetings start, we make it a point through David Hartman to download all of the slides so that you can follow these presentations as we're going through this process. And we'll have to move on to our next presentation, but Director Dunn, I want to thank you so much for being responsive to our committee and being on top of the issues. So look forward to seeing you and to working closely with John Eunice. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We appreciate it.
If y'all will allow a moment while we connect and switch over to our next presentation, which is from Georgia Power. And just a timeline again, it was the will of our committee when this first became an issue before our committee that we stay on top of this issue. So we have required the EPD and Georgia Power to report to our committee each year as long as this process is going on. So I appreciate the committee's tenacity and attention to this matter, and we will continue to do this. And let's see, David, if you'll let me know when we can move over. We're good. We're good to go to our next presentation. And Georgia Power is the one with all the CCR pond closures. And so they're the ones who apply to the EPD for the various permitting processes to be able to address coal pond closures. Thank you. And I'll let someone from Georgia Power, I think it's Aaron Mitchell, just go ahead and introduce yourselves and start the program.
Okay, just confirming you can hear me, Madam Chair.
We can. You
Okay,
have,
great.
yes, we got you.
Okay,
Yeah.
I will share my slides as I'm speaking. Again, I'm Aaron Mitchell. I'm Director of Environmental Affairs for Georgia Power. I'd like to thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the committee for inviting us to speak again and give you an update on our CCR program and our ash pond closures. As we've done in previous years, I will give a high-level overview. I thought Director Dunn did an excellent job in outlining the regulatory framework in which we must comply with, both federal and state. And so I won't belabor that, but hit perhaps a couple of key points there, as well as highlight the specifics of how Georgia Power is executing these closures through different aspects from beginning the closure to the end, and give you a status update on our progress. So just to update the committee, and I know there are some new members who may not have been a part of discussion before, but ash ponds were a part of coal-fired generation since coal-fired generation began. And since environmental regulations were put in place in the 70s, ash ponds were identified as the best source of water treatment for treating the water that helps to handle coal and coal combustion residuals as a result of the power generation process there. Water is used to convey the ash, or was, I should say, used to convey the ash to the ponds, where the ponds acted as a treatment system for the water that came in contact with the ash and settled the ash out. On the bottom of the picture, you can see the different forms of coal combustion residuals. On the left, far left, that's a picture of fly ash. That is the ash, that is the lighter material that we capture in environmental controls as it exits the boiler, where we combust the coal. The bottom ash is the heavier material that does not combust, that falls to the bottom of the boiler when we combust the coal that we collect. Over on the right-hand side, you can see gypsum that's produced from the scrubber operation, where those environmental controls, where we remove sulfur dioxide and mercury from the emissions from a coal-fired plant producing gypsum. Those are primarily the biggest set of coal combustion residuals that we manage under these regulations. Just a little bit of background, that ash ponds in Georgia have been regulated under our wastewater permits at each plant since the permits were issued. And as those ponds are treatment systems for water, the Georgia EPD regulates them and requires us to sample the discharge and provide that to the Watershed Protection Branch, in addition to other forms of water that we treat. Finally, some of these ash ponds are also regulated under the Georgia Safe Dams program, which regulates impoundments of a certain size and requires rigorous inspection and monitoring by both Georgia Power and the state of Georgia to ensure that we operate and inspect these impoundments safely. EPD over the years has looked at coal combustion residuals and studied them since the 80s and determined as recently, several times, and as recently as the 2015 rule, that ash and CCR is a non-hazardous waste and to be handled under the solid waste regulations. Georgia has regulated ash as a solid waste for many, many years, even prior to that. One final point I'd like to make is during the rulemaking process that Director Dunn referenced at the federal level, EPA conducted inspections of impoundments throughout the nation, including here in Georgia and Georgia Power's ash ponds. As well, Georgia EPD has over the years, and especially during the permitting process, continues to conduct inspections of our ash ponds as well. So just to highlight a couple of things, as Director Dunn very well overviewed the regulatory framework, both at the federal and state level. On the right-hand side, just to note, that is a picture of a representation of our ash ponds at our 11 coal-fired, current and former coal-fired facilities throughout the state, and a high-level reference of how we're closing them. As Director Dunn said, in 2015, EPA established the federal CCR rule. Also, as Director Dunn noted, there was no permitting program there and left it to the power plant operators to comply with the rules and then to show that they are complying with the rules by posting information to their own websites. Enforcement of any non-compliance was left to citizen lawsuits and was not enforced by the EPA itself. In addition, the federal rule only regulated about 60% of the ash ponds in Georgia. There were some exemptions for facilities that stopped operating before a certain date and closed their ash ponds before a certain date as well. To contrast that, in 2016, Georgia established their rule. It was more stringent than the federal rule in that it regulated all 29 of our ash ponds, not just the 60% or roughly 18. And it established a comprehensive permitting program under which EPD was the enforcer of compliance and is the enforcer of compliance, as well as the approver of the methods in which we are closing these ponds to show that we are complying with both the federal and the state rules. Just a quick update on the permitting process. And I will mention that both the federal and state rules, even though they were issued in 2015 and 16, respectively, have undergone changes since that time. That is nothing new to the regulated community, as regulations are updated necessarily from time to time. Just to note for the committee, Georgia Power established our plans based on these rules, and we will continue to modify our plans as necessary to comply with rules as both EPA and Georgia EPD see fit. On the permitting program, Director Dunn mentioned second state in the nation to one of two in the nation to get approval for a federally approved permitting program. As a result of the Georgia CCR rules, Georgia Power filed 29 permit applications in November of 2018. Now, in addition to the 29 ash ponds that we have, we also operate and own 12 landfills. Some of those are permanently closed, some of those are still in operation. The 29 permit applications include both applications for ash ponds and landfills in order to comply with Georgia's CCR rule. Now, these permit applications, you see a picture on the right-hand side, that is from Georgia EPD's website of an issued permit for Ash Pond 1 at Plant Hammond. You can see that it contains several different types of information ranging from engineering design and closure plans and drawings to quality assurance to ensure that the construction was done properly per our plans and meets Georgia EPD's rules and requirements. As well, it requires or shows the groundwater monitoring that's contained within the permits. And as Director Dunn mentioned, those monitoring requirements go into the future out 30 years for close in place permits, but also have requirements, as Director Dunn noted, that if conditions change or if EPD sees fit under the permit to require Georgia Power to take action to address any issues that EPD sees, the permit obligates and requires us to respond and provide that information to EPD for their approval before we act. Director Dunn highlighted the permits issued. Currently, those are closure by removal permits, Plant McIntosh, and 3 at Plant Hammond. As the director said, we expect numerous permits to be issued this year and are working through the process of answering EPD's questions as they go throughout review of our plans for the remaining facilities. Just a couple of slides on the way in which we are closing ponds and our overall overview of that closure process. So I mentioned that we have 29 ash ponds at our active and retired coal plants across the state. Each of these ash ponds, even the ash ponds that are located on the same site at the same facility, are different and require a site-specific or pond-specific, if you will, assessment of the proper way to close the ponds and comply with the requirements in the rule. Now, the director mentioned that each closure method requires specific set of requirements that we have to meet, and our permit applications and closure design at each facility highlights the way in which we will meet those for EPD to review and assess if in fact we have met those as part of a closure plan. In developing those applications and designs and assessment on our pond by pond basis, Georgia Power is elected to employ third-party professional engineers and geologists to not only assess the ponds as they exist today, but also to design that closure and ensure that we're meeting compliance so that we can provide that third-party review and information to Georgia EPD for their assessment. Of the 29 ponds, we will remove and excavate 19 of those ponds that are closest to lakes and rivers. The remaining 10 ponds will be closed in place with proven engineering and closure methods that are designed to ensure that we meet the closure specifications in the rule and that they are protective of groundwater. These proven closure methods include closing those ponds with barriers that are designed to cap the ponds, as well could include consolidation of the ash footprint in most cases, enhancements of that cover system or extending it further out than perhaps the design requires. And again, that goes to ensure that we enhance these closures and ensure that they will be protected in meeting the requirements of the rules. One other program level discussion I wanted to have is on dewatering. We've talked a lot about dewatering over the past several years and with this committee. And so I wanted to highlight and refresh our dewatering and water treatment methodologies and how it is regulated. An important step before we can close the ponds is to remove water from the ponds for ponds that can still contain water. Some ponds don't contain water, but during the closure process, we will need to treat any rainwater that does enter the pond while we close the ponds. Our wastewater discharges from our ash ponds are regulated under our wastewater permits issued by Georgia EPD. As part of CCR closure and ash pond closure, Georgia EPD has asked that Georgia Power provide them additional information under those wastewater permits that highlight some specific details about how we are treating water in the ponds and the treatment technologies that we are installing, of which you can see an example in the top right of the slide. Those plans, the dewatering plans that we submit to Georgia EPD for each site include some specific details listed under that first bullet there. Obviously, we include details of the treatment system, the type of treatment technology that we will employ, and they are specifically designed on a site-by-site basis, so they do vary. Other important details that we include is that we have elected to install at each and every facility real-time monitoring equipment that can assess the quality of the water to ensure real-time that the treatment system is functioning effectively. If at any time those monitoring devices indicate that the system is not performing as expected, it shuts the system down, and a certified operator is the only one that can start that system back up after he or she has been assured that things are operating properly. In addition, a couple of key points that we monitor the discharge from the treatment systems on a weekly basis. As well, EPD is required that we monitor the receiving water body, whether that be a lake or a river, both upstream and downstream of our discharge point twice a month to ensure that water quality is being protected even through and during the duration of our dewatering activities. Finally, all this information is submitted to EPD on a monthly basis. And something that we committed to this committee several years ago and we continue to remain committed to is that Georgia Power is focused on transparency here on all of our data, and dewatering data is no different. We post that information also to Georgia Power's website for the public to access. Finally, again, to point out here, similar to the ash pond closure themselves and the closure designs, we have elected to hire third parties to design the treatment systems, to operate the treatment systems, to perform all the sampling that is required by EPD, and to do the analysis. One final step is that we have a third party review the analysis and prepare it for submission to EPD, and that's what we post to our website as well. The bottom right of this slide, before I move on, is a representation of the different parts of a treatment system. This is something that we developed to help communicate what our plans are and to help educate folks that had questions. I know that we've provided it to this committee previously, and this schematic resides on Georgia Power's website as well. just a little bit here on progress. An important note that in 2019, first quarter of 2019, we stopped sending ash to our ponds as we completed construction of the significant equipment that was required for ash handling and new water systems. So ash has not been used or sent to an ash pond since early 2019. And recall that Georgia Power, even before the requirements kicked in that Director Dunn highlighted on requiring utilities to stop using ash ponds, Georgia Power in 2015 made the commitment to close all ash ponds and to convert plants to dry handling systems and move on from the operation of ash ponds. Since I reported last time to the committee, last time we discussed work was ongoing at 14 ponds at 6 facilities. We've now increased that progress to work occurring at 20 ash ponds at 9 facilities. Also, we've increased the number to ash that has been excavated from ponds to 7. And then there's work ongoing, active construction at 13 additional facilities as well. All the remaining ponds are in various stages of either engineering design and permitting as we continue to respond to questions from EPD and make changes to our designs and provide supplemental information to EPD as they review our closure plans for each facility. Groundwater monitoring is something that we've discussed numerous times before, and that began similar to our announcement in 2015 on the ponds. It began early. We published data a full 18 months before the regulations required it. Again, our commitment to being transparent and providing information as we have it on our website. To date, we've installed just under 600 groundwater monitoring wells around all of our ash ponds and landfills. Based on the extensive data collected from those wells, Georgia Power has detected nothing leaving our property that is above the primary drinking water standard at any of our facilities. And to illustrate the magnitude of that data, in 2020 alone, we collected approximately 3,000 or more than 3,000 groundwater samples, and we're compiling those in reports submitted to EPD. I note there, Georgia EPD requires double the amount of reporting than the federal EPA rule does. So we also publish that information to our website. One thing I didn't want to leave without mentioning is I know that we have talked about this previously, both here in the legislature and also at the Public Service Commission. Something that is of great importance to Georgia Power is our efforts to find ways to beneficially reuse the ash that exists in our ponds. Reuse of ash that is generated from our coal plants is something that we've done and done well for many years. We reuse greater than 85% of the ash that's generated at our facilities. In 2019, early 2019, we announced that we would start up and host, in partnership with EPRI, the nation's first ash beneficial use center that's to be located at Plant Bowen. That facility will review processes and technologies to help bring those to bear, make them more marketable and readily available to market, to be able to bring those technologies on site and take the ash that is stored in landfills or ponds to be reused for beneficial use. That facility happily will start operation here in first quarter of 2021. Another significant milestone that we've accomplished is the announcement of a project, the ash that will take the ash from Flint Mitchell's ash ponds and send that completely into a reuse market that will be used in Portland cement kilns to create Portland cement, which is used in concrete as well. And the final piece of our reuse strategy, we issued a request for proposals to any and everybody that wanted to participate for ideas and proposals to go execute for reuse in our ash ponds, ash from our ash ponds across the state. That was sent out in 2019. Bids were received in October, and bid evaluation is currently underway. Dozens of potential interested parties raised their hand, and we look forward to evaluating those bids and hopefully producing more Plant Mitchell type results so that we can take this ash and put it into a useful marketplace. And finally, I'll end with this, Madam Chair. This is a recap and a roadmap, if you will, to information related to our ash pond closures. Our website link is down on the right-hand side of this slide, and you can find information that is both required by the federal rule and also information that we have elected to post beyond the requirements related to our closure methods, as well as groundwater data, as well as dewatering data out on our website. We continue and committed to hosting tours. I know that this committee has visited on a couple of occasions Plant McDonough to view the closure progress there. Also, as we begin dewatering, we have committed to inviting local elected officials, water treatment plant operators, as well as state elected officials. Members of this committee have also participated in these tours. We recently just had, due to COVID-19, our first couple of virtual tours that we hosted prior to dewatering beginning at Plant Hammond and Plant Mitchell. Happy to host anyone that would like to come out and get a closer look at what we're doing there. And just wanted to point out that we'll continue this transparent communication here as we continue through the closure process and the permitting process with Georgia EPD. Madam Chair, that concludes what I had prepared for a presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mitchell. And to our committee, we will have your contact information. And so if we have any additional questions, we're running up against the next scheduled committee times at 9 o'clock, but we have time for one question here, but you are available to our committee for questions, correct?
Yes, ma'am, that'd be my pleasure.
Thank you for your presentation. Who's number 2?
Oh,
Okay.
Well, I'm number 3.
Oh, okay, number 3 was first.
Okay. Mr. Mitchell and Madam Chair, thank you so much for arranging this meeting. These presentations are very helpful, and this information is really vital. In fact, I'd like to request that we have another meeting when we would have time to ask as many questions as the members might have of Mr. Dunn and Mr. Mitchell. But my question is this, Mr. Mitchell, I have a letter that was delivered to the county manager of Cobb, May 8th, 2020, which acknowledges that that certain constituents from coal ash have migrated beyond the property of Plant McDonough. And I'm wondering what, I've actually asked a couple of times and been told I can have a copy of the map of the wells, the testing wells, monitoring wells on Plant McDonough, but I'm concerned about these constituents that have migrated beyond your property, and am not clear how you can prevent that happening without liners, because I know you're in the midst of doing cap in place at McDonough. So I just want to say I'm concerned about that, and and think it does demonstrate that you cannot keep these constituents of ash, coal ash, within your boundaries with cap in place only. I just was wondering what your response is to that.
Sure, Representative. Thank you for the question. Part of the requirements of the rule is includes that notification to adjacent property owners as the groundwater monitoring occurs. Specifically to reference to your reference there at Plant McDonough, we did detect constituents above a significant level at our property line. We followed the requirements of the rule and notified Cobb County of the need to and request to install wells on their property. The results of that monitoring did not find constituents above regulatory standard on Cobb County's property there on the right of way of the road. And so we've continued to monitor those wells to ensure that that remains to be the case. Specific to the closure there at Plant McDonough, ash ponds 3 and 4 are the ash ponds closest to that area. Those ponds, for those of you that have toured the facility, are the ones that have been consolidated. The closure is near complete, and those ponds are expected, the ash there is expected to be dry following completion of the closure activities. And so we feel confident that following our proposed closure plans and the required monitoring and the rules will result in compliance with the rules and in the groundwater quality standards following completion of that closure.
There's several other questions from other legislators. So let's see. To your question, you have every right to ask questions of any presenter to the committee. The committee time is assigned. We're doing our best to get all the information out there. And I do believe both EPD and Georgia Power have stated they are available to us to answer questions. Was there a number 11, 10, or what's your number, sir? 12, okay. We have time for, and then you had a question? So we have time for 2 more brief questions, if you will.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation and your obvious transparency. We thank you for that.
It's Representative Joe Campbell.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's you.
Just one quick question. You mentioned that if the plant was, or the coal ash pond was near a body of water, that the way I heard it, that you automatically removed and did not leave it in place. That's what I was thinking you were saying. I guess my question is there a specific distance that you would be too close to water that you would remove? And also in particular on groundwater recharge areas, how close would you get to those and not remove? I guess is where I am.
Yeah, so thank you, Representative, for the question. We let our engineers determine those specifics. As it came out, those that were closest to water bodies were determined that it was most effective to remove. No specific distance, the engineering, two kind of major points went into that. One, the requirements of the rule and what would be required from an engineering perspective to comply with those rules. And where there was room that the engineers and geologists felt that we could design closures that would comply with those ponds were elected to close in place. And so it's really driven by the science, if you will, the professional geologists and professional engineers looking at each and every pond to determine, do the site specifics warrant a closure in place, and can it be achieved to comply with the rules, or should that pond be excavated? And that applies to both aspects of your question, Representative.
Thank you. I think number 2, I forgot to tell you, I'll state your name, please.
Representative Kauscher from Johns Creek. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your presentation. I'm really concerned about coal ash because, as a disclaimer, I did live in North Carolina when the Dan River accident happened, and I saw very first hand and first sight what the effects of that can be long term. So I appreciate that we put in all these measures to improve the situation. What concerns me that we may keep being more reactive than proactive because a lot of the changes came after we learned what happened in Tennessee and North Carolina. So my question is about the coal ash that remains in the ponds that you are not planning to remove. And you said you're going to monitor it, but do you know how much of coal ash are you planning to leave in the ground without any bottom liners?
Well, that would be 9 of the 10 ponds that we will close in place will not have a liner beneath them. The one that will is Plant Bowen. That's the 10th pond.
So, and you said you're going to monitor it for how long to make sure that it's safe?
At least 30 years, the regulations require. And yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you for your. So back and forth between mask and no mask. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your presentation. And again, it's important to our committee that y'all be available to answer their questions, and you have indicated that you are. So thank you
Yes,
very
ma'am.
much for that. Appreciate your presentation. And we stand adjourned. Thank you, committee.